What is good, everybody? Rob Stats Guerrera here with you with a very special guest. 49er fans are so excited to have Ricky Pearsall as part of the team. So we thought we'd get a little Ricky Pearsall intel with a man who knows him better than most, his former coach at Arizona State, Herm Edwards. Herm, good morning.
Good morning. I know the 49er fans are probably trying to figure out who is this guy. Had a good conversation with John, obviously, before the draft. We generally talk all the time, and similar to when they picked Aiyuk, that is also on that roster right now, along with one of our DBs, Lucas. They got from Detroit. He played at Arizona State as well. So when you think about Ricky Pearsall, to put him in a capsule, it would probably be. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. You can move him around. I know for what Coach Shanahan likes to do with his receivers, they don't all play in one spot. He's that kind of guy. He's a utility guy. You can move him in the slot. You can move him outside. A really good blocker. And in his offense, Coach Shanahan, he wants those receivers to block, so he has that. It has good enough speed. He can get you vertical. He has some toughness to his mindset, how he plays. He's a guy that gives you 100% effort. I mean, and I told John before the draft, I said, look, John, I said, the thing about this guy, he loves football. I mean, he likes practicing football. I mean, and you got to slow him down. You got to protect him from himself. I mean, because he's one of those guys, he's 100 miles an hour every time he walks on the field. And I said, you got to slow him down at times because, he wears himself down. But I think it's a good pick for where they were picking at. When you think about, 31st pick, well, you say, well, man, it might have been a little bit too high. Well, you got to look at it this way. In the draft, you draft for your team. You don't draft for anybody else. And when you look at the board, basically, we knew they needed a tackle, obviously, maybe some secondary help as well. But the receiver room now, all of a sudden, when you look at it, Aiyuk's under contract, but they're trying to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
Debo's there, a guy that's a fantastic player, but has been injured some. Has missed a lot of snaps during his career there. So what do you do with that room if let's say Aiyuk decides to, sit out, or they trade him, or maybe they trade, Debo somewhere. I don't know. I'm just. This is all assumption.
Right.
You got to protect yourself. And so you got to go out and get another young receiver. And so they were able to do that and getting Ricky there at 31st, because when you look at the board after the 31st pick, when it got into the second round, 3 or 4 receivers went right off the board.
Yes.
And that's what generally happens, right? That's just the draft. That's how the draft works. And so if you wait and say, well, we'll wait till the next, you don't pick until 60, 62 or something like that, you're probably not going to get one of those guys. So they put the tag on Ricky. They liked him and drafted him. And I think he's going to have a lot of success in this offense.
You mentioned that he loves football and he's that type of guy. I'm really interested in Ricky Pearsall, the person. Like, when John calls you, or when you talk to John, does he ask you more about the player or more about the character and the person?
Well, they want character guys. And the person, it all works together. And he is that type of a player. You don't have to worry about him at all. I mean, he's going to represent your organization in the correct manner. He's a guy that wants to be successful. He's a hard worker. He does all those little things. I mean, I've watched him mature from a young guy to obviously now, when he went to Florida, just growing up, watching these guys mature, no different than Jaden Daniels. When Jaden Daniels was a freshman, he comes in there and you watch him, and all of a sudden you see the growth in him. And Ricky's kind of had the same growth spurt that Jaden has, more mature, understand what he wants to do. I think COVID, when you think about it, as bad as it was, and it was terrible, it helped a lot of players. It gave them an extra year, right? And you see that maturity. I mean, you see that in the draft now with a lot of these players. They had that extra year. A lot of guys want to leave when they're juniors, right? They want to get out. I get all that. I think NIL is going to help some guys stay now because they're not pressed to always just run to the NFL if they're not going to be a high pick. They say, well, I can play another year. I'm getting some extra money through the name, image, and likeness. So that keeps guys in school, right? So I think that's a good thing in that sense. Now, how it's orchestrated, that's a whole different deal. They'll have to figure that out on their own. But I just think, Ricky's a guy that's more mature now. He's played a lot of football, which is good. He's got a lot of football experience.
Do you think that will help him contribute quicker in the NFL?
I do. And I think receivers and especially receivers, because of the offenses now that you see in college football or in the NFL. They're basically the NFL. I think the thing that's all receivers struggle with is the multitude of coverages from college football to the NFL, right? You're going to see 3 or 4 coverages probably in college. Not saying the coaches can't do it, but they don't have the time that you do in the NFL to run multiple coverages and all these things. So that's going to be the key for any young receiver. I've seen that with all receivers. They come in the league, they understand single safety, understand, 2 safeties, but all of a sudden, combination coverages and how coverages can change. And I think that's going to be the key for him, especially in an offense like San Francisco, because you have to see what the quarterback sees.
Yes.
And when the quarterback makes a check at the line, all of a sudden you might have to cut your right off. Now it might be zone, and there's a softness in the zone where you got to hook up and he's going to throw the ball there, right? So this is the complexity of the NFL compared to college football. Your ability to read coverage, to process it before the ball's hiked, and then run full speed to get to where you're supposed to go.
He talked about wanting to get together with Brock Purdy and work out over the summer. Is he that kind of guy that's going to go that extra mile and we'll get together with Brock to work on some of those things?
Oh, if he had to drive from Arizona every day, he'd do it to San Francisco. He's that kind of guy, right? He has great work ethic. He really does. He wants to work at it. He wants to be the best. I mean, this was his dream to be to play in the National Football League. There's no doubt about that. And now it was kind of ironic. He's from Arizona, obviously. The only other team that's closer than that would be the Arizona Cardinals, but He's in the division of the Cardinals. So that's kind of interesting. He's playing on a team probably that when he was young, he knew about the 49ers. And this is one of the better teams in football when you think about it. They were always in the playoffs, always, trying to win Super Bowl championships, and he understands that. I think he understands when you become a 49er, there's a standard that you have to meet as a player. And especially, think about this, especially at certain positions. Quarterback position, they've had some great quarterbacks there. Wide receiver position, maybe the best wide receiver ever played the game, Jerry Rice. So when you play wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers, there's a legacy there of great players at certain positions, right? And if you play receiver, hey, maybe the best guy ever played for San Francisco. His name was Jerry Rice.
Maybe the best guy that ever played.
I always say this, and the best player to ever play football is Jim Brown. Period. That's the only guy I ever say is the best. Any other position, I always say, is Jerry Rice number 1? There's no doubt. But to say the best ever, there's only one guy, in my estimation, and this is my personal opinion, and it was Jim Brown. He's the best football player to ever put on a suit. God bless him. No longer with us, but God bless him.
So I got a little sensitive there. I love Jerry, and there are some people that
I do too.
Okay.
I played against Jerry when he was a rookie. And he was just coming in the league. And I remember we came out there in Philadelphia. We played San Francisco. We ended up beating them, when Joe was the quarterback. And we ended up beating. We had a pretty good team in Philly back in those days. And they were a young football team. And I can remember walking off the field, and I called a couple of the vets. He ran a couple of routes. And I said, that Rice fella, he's going to be pretty good, guys. I said, he's going to be okay. So I was right on that one.
Yeah, good call there. I heard you in an interview with 95.7 The Game talk about Pearsall is going to have to adjust in the pros to press coverage.
Yes.
What is the difference between press coverage in college and press coverage in the NFL?
Well, I just think that a lot of times, in college football, you get some corners that really don't use their hands, right? They've let guys free release and then they run with them. Well, in pro football,
Huh.
These are your weapons. You know, you always got to stop them at the line because in pro football, it's all on timing. Everything is timed out. And you can't waste a lot of time at the line of scrimmage. You have to get a free release because the quarterback's counting on you to get a free release. You know, and you don't just run fade routes. You don't run
Right.
fade routes all day. You know, in college football, what's great about college football, there's a short field and there's a wide field. Right? So they can roll the coverage up on the short field
Mm-hmm.
or the wide field, however they want. And somebody's going to get one-on-one. And generally, those guys, what do they run? They run a fade.
Right.
And the guy throws the ball over there and the guy runs and catches it. Well, in pro football, that ain't happening. These corners are really good. They're not going to allow you a free release, and you have to get away from hands. It's not the feet, it's the hands that the corners use in today's game. And I always say this, when corners don't use their hands, they're really not playing bump and run. They're playing bump and chase. They're chasing. And you know, and John knows that. I used to tell John that all the time. When we were in practice, I used to tell those guys, they line up on somebody. I said, man, you can play bump and run, or you can play bump and chase. And when you play bump and chase, you know what they say after that? We receive.
What?
Because
How
going to be bad, something bad's about to happen. We'll get beat.
did you have any other teams calling you up, asking you about Pearsall or some of the players you had?
Yeah, and I won't get into the teams. I mean, I get calls collectively, you know, during that week of the draft by a lot of teams, you know, by certain positions, obviously. You know, Jaden Daniels. I mean, there's a lot of guys that were down there, you know, that played for us. But and that's fun talking to them, and they just want to know from, you know, my opinion on the guy, and they're really looking for information on the player.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much, you know, you can evaluate him on the film, but who's the guy I'm bringing into my organization? That's what they want to know. Who is this guy? Who is he, coach? We can tell what kind of talent he has because where we want to draft him at. But who's the player that we're about to invest? Is he a fit here? What makes him go, coach?
And it seems like the 49ers, and you kind of hinted at this earlier, have collected a bunch of guys that have that kind of crazy, die-hard football mentality. I feel like it's very important to John Lynch that this locker room is full of guys that think that way.
Absolutely. And I think it resonates from the head coach to John, because John was that kind of guy. You know, and I think, you know, the uniqueness of John is interesting because he was on a Buck team that when Tony Dungy and myself, and along with Lovie Smith, we had a great staff of coaches. We go down there and, you know, we're trying to rebuild this team. Now, it had some good players already in place, and we drafted some players as well. You know, you drafted Sapp, you drafted Ronde Barber, a bunch of guys you draft, right, as well. And John saw the making of a franchise that really was headed in the wrong direction, had a lot of talented players, but really didn't play together as a team so much. And we got them to believe in that, and the guys we drafted. And John watched it. He saw this thing being built. And that's why it was unique when he goes to San Francisco. And I look at how he's doing it. It's like similar to what he did, you know, what we did in Tampa. So he understands that. And obviously, the head coach, Coach Shanahan, he's watched his dad build football teams as well. So you have guys that have been places where they see how it works.
Well, I know a lot of 49er fans are very excited about Ricky Pearsall. I've heard you talk about him just as a player, the versatility he has. You expect to see him all over the field, in the slot, out wide, kind of everywhere?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you know, and it's all this is how much can he compute? You know, how much can he process, right? And because for any rookie, it's a lot of information. This is this is one of the most complicated offenses in the league now. I mean, you got to be pretty smart to line up because you're going to be asked to do a lot of things, right? And that's what's great about the offense. You know, there's simplicity in it, but there's some difficultness in it too, according to where you line up, right? And if you're a receiver and you play the spot that Ricky plays, you're not always going to be the X. You know, you could Z, you could be in the slot. Then there's motion. Then there's shifts. I mean, all these things are happening, and then things change. All of a sudden, the coverage changes. So, you know, you're going to have to be able to process all that. And I think Ricky will, but he's like any rookie guy. It's going to be new. They'll bring him along. They'll give him bits and pieces. And eventually, you know, he'll get going. And because the thing that you want players to be able to do, you know they're talented. You want them to be able to play fast. Guys can't play fast when they have to think. So how much do you give him? And I think coaches will, do a good job of only putting so much on his plate where he can handle, and then give him a little more. But you can't give him all too much, because then it slows him down, slows any guy down. And then that's the thing you learn about rookies when they come in the league, according to the position they play. How much are you going to put on the guy's plate? Because you want him to play fast, right?
Kyle is notoriously tough on rookie and young wide receivers.
Yep.
Kyle has said that basically rookie wide receivers do like one thing a day that just ticks him off. If he comes down on Ricky, pretty hard, can Ricky handle that kind of tough coaching?
Yeah, and I think this is where Aiyuk struggled with him. Him and Aiyuk had that little,
yes,
and I can remember the conversations, right? And it ended up working out. It always does. And it's just, there's a standard that Kyle wants receivers to understand they got to meet. He used to be a receiver coach, and he has some great receivers, so he's hard on receivers. It's like I always used to tell defensive backs when I became a head coach, I go, look, you got a defensive coordinator, you're going to have a secondary coach, and that's great. But the problem you're going to have is me, the head coach. I said, because I'm the secondary guy at the end, and my eyes don't lie. And I said, guys, I'm just telling you, don't take it personal, but I'm watching, and my eyes always end up going there in practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I just watch guys, and I tell them, hey man, don't take it personal. I'm gonna get after you because I want you to be great. I don't want you to be good. I want you to be great. And you're playing the hardest position in football beside quarterback. You're playing the hardest position in football beside quarterback's hardest one. And then after that, if you play in the secondary, you got a tough spot to play in, especially in today's world, right? Because the way they throw the football and the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm watching, and secondary guys know, they go, oh, coach coming over here. Even the offense start laughing. You see these things going on, and the offense say, he's going to be back there in a minute, watch. And all of a sudden I go in the back, and here I am up back there with the secondary guys again.
So it never leaves you. Like you, despite even when you're a head coach and you have all these other responsibilities, you still are kind of at heart, you still have the eyes of a DB coach.
Oh, there's no doubt. And you can't help it, because you played the position for such a long time. And, you don't want to, I trust my coaches, and I don't try to outcoach the coach, but sometimes I see things that they don't see as quick as I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's something about, I've always said this, when you actually play the position, there's certain things that if you haven't played that position, you can't teach them. There's certain things that'll come up and you go, that ain't in the book.
Mm-hmm.
That's not in the book where you can open the book up and say, oh, no. This is what it is, because you've experienced it. So if I can give them experience before they go through it, it's like your kids. When you're raising kids, you tell them, well, don't do that because, you did it as a kid. That never works out, and they still do it.
Right. They never listen, Herm.
They don't listen, right? But would you tell DBs that, then all of a sudden they kind of look, yeah, coach, I got it. Then they get beat for a touchdown. Then they come back and say, coach, you were right. I say, yeah, well, I'm trying to tell you that I was right at the beginning. That wouldn't happen to you. So it's kind of interesting when you go and you look at them and you say, look, you got to do this because this is what's going to happen, right? And I've experienced it. Right? Because remember, when you play in the secondary, you're playing a position of reaction. You got to react to something. You're always chasing. And I always say there's a difference between chasing and being in panic mode. When you panic, bad things happen. They just do. You're going to foul the guy, something bad's about to happen. You're going to be in a chase mode. Probably, 70% of the time you're going to be in a chase mode because that's just the way the position is played.
Right.
And then it's just, where's the guy going and what angle do I need to take to cut him off? And where is my help? I tell guys that all the time. Hey man, know where your help's at. My famous rule of tackling. And when I can remember saying it the first day we started tackling, and it was John was back there. I said, John, let me tell you something. I'm going to give you this one thought. Know where to miss. And he looked at me. He says, know where to miss? I said, yeah, know where to miss. You're going to miss some tackles. But if you miss him going the right direction and you turn him back because you missed him, he's running into the pursuit. The other guys will knock him out. They're going to tackle him for you. just nowhere to miss, man. And you go over and over, and the guys look at you at first and, what are you talking about, coach? Nowhere to miss. If you miss him and you're sending back to the pursuit, I don't even count it as a missed tackle. Because the other guys running, they're going to tackle a guy. But when you miss him on the wrong side, where he can go now 25 yards because you missed him, you missed him on the wrong side where you're supposed to be, that's a problem, right? So there's things like that you tell guys, don't nowhere to miss, don't panic, and here's the hardest thing for defensive. And I know we're talking about Ricky Pearsall, now I'm on the defense. I always tell guys, when the ball's in the air, and this is what drives me crazy, the ball doesn't belong to anybody. It's actually a free ball. And you see so many guys that when they're running down the field, they don't turn and play the ball. And I'm going, guys, it's a free ball. It doesn't belong to the offense. The quarterback just threw it. If anybody that plays the ball now can go get the ball. And you have to pound that in their brain, And there's a part of playing DB, and this is the hardest part. Some guys naturally know when to turn and play the ball. And some guys panic. And when they panic, two bad things happen. Either the receiver catches it, or you get a pass interference call and it's a 50-yard gain and the guy never caught the ball, right? And I tell guys, that's the hardest thing about playing this position. Because if you foul this guy and he doesn't catch the ball, it's still a gain. It could be a 50-yard gain and the guy never caught the ball because you panicked, right? And I always tell guys, when the ball's in the air, play the ball. Be in position to turn your head and play the ball.
And some of those guys that panic are on the 49ers right now, Herm. I've seen a couple of them. Ambry Thomas, you could tell when they're in panic mode.
Trust me. I've talked to John about this numerous times. They got to play the ball. And there's this clock in your brain that you got to know. I'm in a point now where I'm in position where I'm not worrying about covering this receiver anymore.
Right.
I'm going to play the ball. I'm going to turn, and there's a way you got to turn, depending what angle you're at and where you're running. But it behooves you. It's a free football. It's just floating in the air. I tell people, guys, it's just floating in the air. It doesn't automatically go into the receiver's hands. Play the ball. It's amazing if you just play the ball. And, if I could teach a class, that's what I would teach DBs.
You can actually teach that, or is that kind of an innate thing?
There's an instinct, but you can also teach it. You can teach it so you can clean it up some, but the guys that are the great interceptors that intercept balls, they understand with a point of, at this point, I've got to turn and play the ball, but not only am I playing the ball, I'm going to try to catch it. See, I always tell guys, don't knock it down. You want to catch it. That's taking a possession away. If you knock it down on first down, guess what? They got two more down.
Right.
They got two more down. Intercept the ball. Just take it away. Take it away. Catch the ball. And John will tell you, we used to do more. Every time I did drills with the defensive backs beside tackling drills, there was always a ball. I was throwing them the ball. At the end of the segment of the drill, they were catching the ball. I wanted them to get comfortable catching the ball. Because you have to have confidence to catch it. See, and the problem with these guys, most of the time, their back is turned away from the ball. So they don't see it until the last moment. And you got to adjust. Where the receiver does it his whole life. He understands that at a certain point, the ball's coming down, I'm going to play the ball. DBs are always in the chase mode. I'm in the mode. The first thing that happens, they want to turn and hit the ball rather than, if you can be in a position to catch it first. So it's something you got to teach, because when you look at it in today's world, the way the ball's in the air, what is about average 35 passes, 40 passes a game?
Nowadays, yeah.
Think about that. That's 2 turnovers. If you're a good secondary and they throw it that many times, you should at least get two a game. 2 a game.
Boy, that's a high standard.
Do the math. I mean, think about it. Quarterback throws how many passes? 500, 600 passes? 550 passes in a year?
Yeah.
Think about it.
2 more questions for you before you go. First, Give me your best John Lynch story as a player and your relationship with him. Is there one particular memory or story that comes to mind when you think of John?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple, but I'll give you this one. So when he starting, I told him this. I said, look, you're going to be in the box a lot. We're going to move you around. You know, 'cause he was like a chess piece for us on defense. You could put him at linebacker. You could put him at the high safety, playing cover 2. You could put him in the middle. You know, you could just use him. You could blitz him, a lot of different things. So, but I told him, I said, look, here's the deal, man. I said, when they run those dig routes, because they're going to clear you out with a post, and I said, when you come down there and you're playing that lurk position, you come down there in that dig area where that guy's running across the middle. I said, the first one that comes across there, I said, take him out. Just run right through him. Don't even play the ball, John. Just hit him as hard as you can. He looked at me and said, what? I said, hit him. I said, if it's a foul, I'll take the penalty. Don't worry about it. I'll tell Tony you're good. Sure enough, somebody comes out, they hit him. And then I told him, I said, after that, I said, now, you have to worry any more dig routes. There's no more dig routes coming in there because those guys don't want to come in there. And it was funny because, you know, we use him a lot of different ways. And basically what we did with him, we knew that the offensive coordinators were always trying to figure out where 47 was. And we'd use him in disguise and coverages. He'd sometimes come down in the box, oh, he's blitzing. And then we'd play some kind of 3 deep zone, or, you know, we put him on the tight end, man to man, and we'd blitz him, you know. So we knew that people were looking at him trying to read our defense. And we weren't very complicated at all. And you don't need to be. You got 4 Hall of Famers. You got Sapp, Brooks, Lynch, and Barber on defense. You don't need to be complicated. You know, you got to be pretty good. And we were good. But John was like the guy, and he was the captain of that defense, believe it or not. He was the captain. And he was the guy that could give him the call, get everybody. But he was the guy that was a chess piece on defense for us, because we can move him around. And that helped our disguise. So we got a really great relationship. I mean, you know, for a long time, we've been friends. I mean, it's our families are really close. You know, we're the godparents of you know, he's the godparents of our son, Marcus.
Wow.
And we're the godparents of Leah, one of his daughters. And so we always, they're family, man. I mean, John and Linda and those kids and his family, they're family.
Last question before I let you go, and thank you for so much of your time. I really appreciate it. You obviously coach Brandon Aiyuk as well. Aiyuk has, at this point, a relatively uncertain future with the 49ers. Do you think that they will get everything worked out and that Aiyuk will be with the Niners long term?
That's what I'm hopeful for, and I think the 49ers want it as well. And you know, I do know this, and I've told players this previous when I was a coach. I said, look, when you get into the contract deal, remember something. That's the business part of the NFL. It's not personal. And I said, the organization understands that, and you have to understand that as a businessman now. And I told that to all my players. I said, look, it's business. And there can be, you know, back and forth, and but don't take it personal. And once it's done, then it's time to go play football again. So whatever's going on, if you're a fan, don't get mad at the player. Don't get mad at the organization. This is just business, right? And eventually something will happen. And we're all hoping that Brandon's going to stay a 49er. And that'd be great because him and Ricky could play together. That'd be wonderful. And along with Chase Lucas, who's there as well. Mm-hmm. You know, and then when it's over, just come in and go catch some touchdowns and play football.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, but when you look at it, it's happened to numerous players. Mm-hmm. It happens every year. And I always used to tell players, watch how this guy does his contract. Watch what happens. And I used to come into a meeting sometimes and say, look, that's business, guys. And I used to say, one day you might be in that player's seat. So understand how he's handling it, so you don't have to handle it that way. But there's business. Don't take it personal. And if you just leave that alone, when it's done and you're back on that football team, you just go back to playing. And players know that. They know that. And the organization knows that as well.
Well, hopefully it gets done. We're all looking forward to seeing that trio out on the field. Coach, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your stories. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, my friend. It's good seeing you as well.